Hey everyone, welcome to the AI Canvas, the podcast that explores the impact of generative AI on businesses, the arts, and our everyday lives. I'm your host, David Foster, co-founder of Applied Data Science Partners and author of the book Generative Deep Learning, Teaching Machines to Paint, Write, Compose, and Play. Now, over the coming weeks, we'll be diving deep into fascinating conversations with a diverse range of thought leaders, including musicians, artists, journalists, educators, marketers, lawyers, and those at the cutting edge of this fascinating field. We'll explore their unique insights into the opportunities and potential threats of deploying this technology across industries and how it's going to reshape our world. We have a fascinating conversation ahead of us, so sit back, relax, and let's dive into the world of generative AI right here on the AI Canvas. Well, hello and welcome back to the AI Canvas, the podcast where we talk about generative AI and its impact on business, the arts, and society in general. I'm your host, David Foster, and today we are so happy to be joined by a really interesting guest who's going to be taking us through the legal implications of generative AI, particularly with regards to intellectual property law and all of the many ramifications that generative AI is going to have in this field. So without further ado, I want to introduce Elena Gurevich. Elena is a lawyer with a background in IP law, and she's passionate about exploring the potential for this technology, such as AI, blockchain, and its impact on the legal profession. She also serves as the Director of Development at the Center for Art Law, a Brooklyn-based nonprofit organization that's all about promoting awareness and understanding of legal issues in the art world. So, Elena, fantastic to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, David.
Great. So I would like to start by asking you a bit about how you got into this field, IP law, and in particular, why AI and generative AI in particular interests you so much.
So I graduated from Cardozo in 2017, and I received my LLM from Cardozo essentially. And as a matter of fact, I didn't know what my concentration was until I graduated. So, because I sort of kind of picked up all the subjects that sort of were aligned with intellectual property. And up until the point, really, I was about to graduate, I didn't even realize that that was my focus. That was my main interest. But what got me into law school here was the fact that a very nice story. I was a fan of the A Lady in Gold movie. I don't know if you watched it.
I haven't heard of it. No, what's that about?
Yeah, it's a movie with Ryan Reynolds about art restitution of the famous Gustav Klimt's painting, and the legal implications that were kind of just around that. And I got into this whole idea of just art restitution and art and law since I've been always passionate about the art, and I consider myself to be a bit of an artist.
And what kind of art?
Just some amateur stuff, drawing, sketching, sometimes painting. But when I used to have more time, I used to do it more often. But right now, kind of just whenever I have free time, and I don't have much.
As an AI lawyer, probably not much, no.
Yeah, I mean, also 3 kids do this too, just kind of.
Oh yeah, sure.
Automatically, 0 time for everything. But yeah, so kind of just everything clicked, and I was like, so law and art, and kind of here we go. And from then on, just I don't know, everything kind of came into place, and intellectual property was the right way. Kind of
couldn't be more.
Yeah, to combine both of my passions. So here we were, and later on, I got involved with the Center for Art Law, which is an amazing organization, and kind of get to know all the amazing people, the artists, art entrepreneurs, art lawyers, to get really into the depths of how the art market works and everything. And that was it. And when the digital art came in, right? So we all remember the year the people NFTs exploded, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was during the pandemic. Everybody started talking about NFTs. Everybody was obsessed with it. $69 million. What can be better, right? And kind of just I started, it kind of got on my radar, but I was personally interested in that, nothing professional, because obviously the pandemic, let's not forget about the 3 kids, zero time. So kind of just my professional focus was nowhere near the NFTs. But later I kind of got to exploring it more in professional terms. And that's where I uh, sort of fell into the proverbial wormhole, as they say, just it kind of sucks you in, and
Yeah.
that's it. And from then on, exploring all the technology, all the possibilities, the blockchain, crypto art, digital art, and it's just from there it went on and on and on. It just never stopped.
Yeah, it feels like it's snowballing, doesn't it, at the moment with
Yes.
the different
Oh,
kinds of
especially today.
technology. Yeah, and
Especially today.
would you
Yeah.
say that the generative AI movement has turbocharged, or at least changed the conversation in IP law? From what I'm hearing, it's kind of it's something that I don't think many people saw coming, and maybe things that weren't as important, a year or 2 years ago, are now suddenly extremely important. Like people used to talk about, oh, what if an AI creates something, and people were like, yeah, okay, but that's like miles away, and now it's like here,
Yeah.
and we've got to be so careful.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, even like a few years ago, right? I don't know if you remember, but I believe it was in 2018, the first generative AI. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it was made by GAN, if I'm not mistaken.
Was this the portrait?
The first, yeah, the portrait of
Mhm.
Edmond Bellamy.
That's the
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
this fictitious character that was auctioned off at Christie's and sold
Mm-hmm.
for the obscene, I believe it was like $500,000 type of.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it was like 400 something thousand dollars. And so this portrait of this fictitious Edmond Bellamy mm, was the first one pretty much to kind of be that started this whole conversation, right? But back then, people were not really kind of taking it
Mm.
seriously. Everybody was like, "Yeah, okay, so this this art? If that's what you call art, that means, guys, come on." But
Mm.
the fact that everybody, I think nobody expected this coming, right? Coming back to your question, even the developers and the people
Yeah.
who are working in this sector, right? They did not expect this technology to explode this way. I mean,
Not to this scale. Yeah, for sure.
not even to talk about just like the regular people, right? The artists and
Mm.
attorneys and whoever is working.
And what was
Uh,
do you remember your sort of feeling at the time when the Edmund Bellamy portrait came out? Did you start to think like, okay, this is going to get big quite quickly? Did you feel like this is a turning point, or did you think at the time this is a gimmick and actually, ultimately we're going to come back to the same questions that we've been dealing with for years? There isn't going to be this explosion. Do you remember what you felt at the time?
I I definitely didn't dismiss it as being a gimmick. That's for sure. I thought it was something like we were on the precipice of something, kind of like the technology got to that point where it can generate portraits, right? I mean, apart from the fact that it was blurry and kind
Mm.
of just out of focus and stuff, right? But like from the considering it was trained, if I'm not mistaken, like on 15,000 images, right? They took like
Something like
different
that. Yeah.
portraits from like 14th century up until 20th century, kind of just
Mm.
train the algorithm like on those paintings.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, looking from today back to 2018, right? Looks pretty amazing to me,
Yeah.
but definitely didn't dismiss it. But it kind of was just like, where are we going from here, right? So how it's gonna affect the creative sector, how it's going to affect the legal aspects of this. It's just, yeah, it was very fascinating. I remember I was
Yeah.
just thinking like, this really kind of just, it's here, the
But and
technology is here.
yeah, and I remember at the time though, I don't remember many people standing up and saying like this is going to cause huge copyright issues. I remember people being like, "Oh, that's cool." So would you say then that the velocity at which AI art is now possible to generate is part of the problem? I guess looking back to the Edward Bellamy case, it was a one-off. No one was really talking about it as being something that was going to cause huge copyright issues. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at today the possibility of generating thousands of new images instantly and trained on data that is under copyright, a lot of it. So do you think the velocity is part of the problem, the ease of which it's possible to generate these pieces of art now?
Yes, I mean I believe it's a crucial part of the problem, because obviously from now on the amount of AI generated content will just exponentially grow, right? So there's no two ways about it, and especially in the field of the art world, the amount of AI generated works just, as you said, exploded. So the artists who have been traditionally sort of just in the realm of their own, kind of just being this creative breed, they found themselves being pretty much, I don't know, out of their element, because right now they have to compete with all those works that can be pretty much created on the spot and in large quantities, and just kind of, I can understand the sentiment that they are thinking. A lot of artists actually are thinking that AI basically will be taking their jobs, because there are huge implications, obviously, copyright implications, intellectual property implications of all of that. So yeah.
Yeah. Could you maybe summarize some of those implications? What are the big questions being faced by IP lawyers today, especially with regards to AI art? How would you summarize it?
So obviously, with everything, what's been going on today, right? So the main focus of copyright law, just kind of just to summarize it, uh, to protect the creator's work, right? The copyright is automatically, you obtain copyright automatically just the moment you create your original work, and it's fixed in a tangible medium, right? So you write a poem, or you paint a picture, you write a novel, so and it's fixed and it's yours, and you are the copyright owner. And the work has to be original, sufficiently creative, right? So it has to have at least, like, the bar is actually very low, so it has to have like a little, just a sufficient modicum of creativity to be yours, right? So, and where AI generated art comes in is the fact that those AI generated, like, models, right? So they've been trained on vast amounts of data, and that data is not open source, at least not all of it, right? So some of the works those algorithms been trained on, obviously it's copyrighted, and the issue comes in if the input is copyrightable, what goes out, right? With the output, what do we do with the output? Who owns it? Who is the author? Who is to be attributed? Who has the rights? Who is the copyright owner? And it's very difficult, and the legal framework has been not clear on it, obviously, because the copyright law had never anticipated dealing with generative AI. So right now, within the legal framework, there are sufficient sort of discrepancies. It's such a gray area today, so nobody really knows how to deal with it. And there are a few cases currently right now pending, that might kind of shed some light on it, and maybe we'll know, I don't know, this year, by the end of this year, kind of just, at least we'll get some guidance on this. But
Yeah.
as of right now, it's very murky.
Is this
But
the
that's why
case
it's so
with?
fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah. Is this particularly you're referring there to the case with Stability AI, and I think a few other companies that are being sued by three artists.
Yeah. The Anderson class action lawsuit. Yeah, that as well. But Stability AI, actually, they have, I believe, in total 3 cases pending. right now, right? So that's the Anderson class action lawsuit, as well as Getty suing them in Delaware, as well as in the UK. So I'm counting three.
Yeah.
But the class action lawsuit that we're talking about. There, three artists are suing Stability AI, Midjourney, and DeviantArt, and they are alleging that millions of copyrighted works were used to train the AI models, right? And the argument is that that's copyrighted material and the works are protected and they were used to train the models. And the Stability AI, DeviantArt, and Midjourney's argument is that it's basically fair use, right? So you can't really know out of billions and billions of images the model was trained on, right? You can't really be sure. First of all, the artists failed to identify which images exactly were used to train the models here. So their argument, I wouldn't call it persuasive per se, but the argument is sort of, kind of just, I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. It's almost like an emotional argument. It's like an
Their
outcry
argument,
against this.
It's more emotional because I mean, I understand where the artists are coming from, because obviously it's their job, it's their art, it's their creation, and they have been very, very outspoken about it. But what their claim sort of failed to grasp, I believe, it's how this whole technology works, because they pointed out that basically the AI, generative AI, is sort of just like a collage tool, right? They're just using copy pasting the work, and that's it. But that's not, in fact, how these models work. So they kind of just missed the point there. And I believe Getty has the better argument in the Getty case, regarding the enforcement of their copyright rights. So that case, I would consider to be a stronger case.
So I want to dig into a couple of I wanted to just dig into a couple of things you said there. So one of these terms that I hear a lot is fair use. I wonder if you could just describe what that means from a legal perspective. What are kind of examples of something being fair use and where it's not fair use?
Sure. So fair use is sort of an exception to the copyright that a copyright owner has, is a limited exception to use somebody's copyright work without permission. If it's a commentary, if it's a parody, if it's for research purposes or educational purposes, something like that. So, for example, if you posted a video, right, and I copied your video and used it in my news channel to talk about some development news, right? So that would be fair use, because I didn't use it for commercial purposes. I didn't distribute it for anything else other than just to report the news. So the fair use analysis is a tricky one, because it's kind of it's a case by case basis, and it depends. It strictly depends on the facts, and obviously none of the cases are the same. So the four fair use factors are usually kind of considered all together, and none of the factors is a definitive one. So it's fair use analysis is again, in the case of generative AI, is a very, very tricky subject, and it's going to be very interesting where it's going to go with the present case law that we have. And I'm pretty sure we'll have more cases coming. And that's why it would be great to get some guidance, some legal guidance where we stand in terms of fair use application and generative AI and the art that's been generated by AI. So it's
Am I
gonna
right in thinking? Am I right in thinking that fair use also covers things like transformative processes? So if you take someone's art and satirize it, or do something in a way that makes it ultimately a different piece of art, that counts as fair use in a lot of cases. And I suppose part of the argument is, well, this art isn't being reproduced like for like. It's being used ultimately to create some weights in a neural network. And so there is a disconnect between the original art and this transformed piece, which, whilst it may borrow in some derivative way from the original piece, it's never could be claimed to be a copy. That's, I guess, part of the argument against the claim that this is not fair use. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And part of the fair use analysis is whether the work is substantially similar, right? How much of the original work the person used in their work and their derivative work. It was the part that the person used the core of the like essentially the essence of the artwork, right? Or were those details are kind of minor details that don't kind of comprise the whole piece. So this analysis again is a very tricky one. It's very detail oriented. It's going to depend on the pretty much all the intricate details of the artwork. And yeah, I mean, again, the applications of fair use in terms of generative AI, is just mind-boggling. I mean,
And a minefield.
I know, right? And it's just like whenever you're reading about all those cases, and I also think it's also important to know the technology again in, for example, the Chris Kashtanova case, right? I believe you heard of it. Chris Kashtanova, digital artist, she authored a novel called Zari of the Dawn, and she worked on Midjourney, kind of created all those images, and she filed for to receive a copyright registration, and she did. But when the U.S. Copyright Office kind of got got the news that she used Midjourney to do the images, they revoked her copyright registration, and she had to appeal it, and then they issued a response that the images by themselves are not protected work since they were generated by Midjourney, but the compilation of the images on the pages, the text, obviously, everything else was copyrightable, but except for the images themselves, these were not, in fact, copyrighted. And then the U.S. Copyright issued a guidance. That's, as of today, that's the closest we have to some sort of just guidance in terms of where do we stand with generative AI, right? And there, I believe they missed the mark a little bit, because they essentially say that no prompt can equal to sufficient human input, right? There has to be some creativity, like I said before, and some originality in order for the work to be copyrightable. And I'm of the opinion that if a prompt is sufficiently creative, right? If it's sufficiently developed and you really thought it through and you kind of just put your heart into it, and you really worked on that and you really have a great idea behind that, it can be copyrightable. But that's not obviously what the US Copyright Office says. And it's a very tricky thing, even in terms of how people understand, or whether they understand the technology and how it works, and their views of that will differ. And it's mind-boggling.
And do you think different countries and different legislative units will see this differently? Like the US law on this is going to be very different from the EU law, is going to be different from the UK law. Do you see there being conflicts between like where artists can create their art because of the differences between countries? Is this an international issue?
I think it should be an international issue. I mean, it already is, but in terms of regulation, I think it should be internationally aligned, because obviously nobody would benefit from different countries having different regulations on that. Because I mean, we are talking about AI here, right? And generative AI, it's worldwide. We can't just attribute it so it's only used in the US, right? It's everywhere. So I would love for every country, and like all the countries who are dealing with that, kind of have the same agenda and the regulations on that subject. Well, but as of today, the EU obviously is at the front or forefront of the regulation of generative AI and AI in general. So as probably last week they finally agreed on the EU AI Act amendments, and kind of it's going to go from there. So it's going to be adopted later on this year, and they are dealing with the AI developments in the AI sector very proactively, I think, and that's what the US should strive for. Yeah, the US kind of is trying to catch up. They've been talking about some organizing some committees, and the US Copyright Office has been setting up public listening sessions in order to get people's input from the creative sector, legal perspective, and later on they'll issue their findings on that subject. But I think it's nearly not enough, whatever has been done so far, in terms of just the sheer speed of the technology and the way it's evolving. It's exponential. Every single day, tons of new tech is coming out. I mean, I'm having headaches just to kind of trying to keep up with everything. And I believe you as well. It's just kind of, whenever you're missing 1 or 2 days of not reading your emails or anything, it's just, okay, what did I miss? And it's just your head explodes because you missed a lot. And it's very hard. And considering it took the US at least 4 years to catch up with crypto and blockchain, I'm not very optimistic in terms of when it comes to AI, because the US government has been known to kind of just to take their time, and that's not the case when they should be taking their time. That's the case where you should be proactive, and we should have the agency to do something, because otherwise it's going to be too late and you'll just be left behind, and I don't know.
Yeah, I think what you said there, you put it really sort of eloquently. I think just summarizing this sort of need for an immediate response. Like, we need to talk about this now, and it's important that we don't leave this to the point where there's ambiguity in law, and that there's cases being filed and no one really knows where the precedent is. But also not moving so fast that we make rash decisions, and that there needs to be real thought, but in a way that kind of aligns with everybody's views, and taking into account the views of the artists, and taking into account the fact that there needs to be a degree of fairness, and what really does a fair use mean in the eyes of the law when it's an AI production and not a human production. It also brings to mind questions around the difference between, say, training a model and using copyrighted work or uncopyrighted work to do so, and then usage of that model to produce art. They feel like two different things that we need to talk about, and it's quite often the case that I hear them blurred together, that we should, AI art should be banned because it's unfair to the artists. But it's not clear whether people mean, do they mean training the model should be banned, or do they mean people should be stopped from using these models? Because as far as I understand, the early sort of stability models were all trained by a university, and there's a lot more leniency in fair use when it's for academic purposes. So Are we saying, that we should stop them altogether? In which case, can universities experiment with these technologies? Or is it, the commercial application of the technologies that we want to limit? Do you see that in the legal cases as well, that there's a need to talk about the production of the models separately from the usage of those models commercially?
Yeah. So, for example, the Getty versus Stability AI case, right? So there, what Getty alleges is basically the Stability AI trained their models on millions, I believe it was in the millions, 12 millions of copyrighted, licensed images. So essentially, Getty is licensing those images. And as far as I understand, the OpenAI sort of could have used a chance to license them. Instead, they haven't, and they just decided to outright use the images to train their models. And so for the case purposes, I believe they are arguing that there's, I think, 12, 1,200 images that were used by OpenAI, and some of them even have the watermarks of Getty watermarks on them. So kind of it's undisputed that the images were used. And the images that could have been licensed by Getty, right? So they were used by OpenAI and without a license. And OpenAI, by generating the output by using those images, sort of creates a competition to the Getty's market, right? So we are talking about whether there is a competition for the market of the original work with the derivative work. And that's kind of where it just, the rubber meets the road, so to speak, is Getty. Essentially, Getty doesn't mind, like they don't deny the technology and they are very open to it and they would love to collaborate. That's at least that's their stance, right? But they're like, if you could at least license our work, right, or talk to us before doing this, that's that would be okay. But OpenAI didn't, and kind of that's where everything sort of fell apart. So yeah, I mean, essentially, when it comes to the market of the work potentially being like superseding, right, the original works market, yeah, it's definitely the fair use analysis won't be that fair to OpenAI, because the Getty's claim is, I think, much stronger than the class action lawsuit of the artists.
So it's almost as if they're saying, look, we are willing to meet somewhere in the middle here, but actually, if you're not going to license the images in the first place, then that eats into our business model, and this is now beyond the point where we can just say this is about generative AI. This is a direct challenge to the very business that we're trying to operate. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, I see. And in terms of then the artists themselves, so if you were an AI artist or an artist in general, would you be sort of thinking to yourself that this is going to be a challenge to your profession, or do you sort of think of this as something like photography, where it's going to come along and certainly change what art is and what it means to be an artist, but ultimately art will continue, and art is a never-ending cycle of people's creativity merged with the technology of the time, and that this is just another example of a technology coming along that's going to transform the way we see art, but not kill it. If anything, it might make it thrive.
I think this is a very personalized view, if you will. Kind of it's gonna depend on the person, on an artist, because some artists have been known to embrace the technology. They're using all the generative AI models in their art and they love it and they use it as a tool. That's what they call it. Essentially, it's kind of just the upgrade from Photoshop, if you will, again. But there are a lot of artists out there who genuinely think that's the end of their career as artists. And some of them are saying, what's even the point of creating art anymore, right? And I understand both sides, but the technology is here. It's not going anywhere. The Pandora's box, again, cliche, but come up with a different one, right? The Pandora's box has been opened. So either you, again, get on the train and deal with it in terms of regulation, in terms of adoption, in terms of guardrails, to kind of we need to be proactive in how we implement that. And with artists, again, I think it's the same thing. If you're not gonna use the AI, use AI in your work, if you're not using it as a tool, you're free to do that. But at least don't deny the existence of it, and don't just dismiss it and say it's kind of just the society has been polarized to the point, like it's either people are saying the AI is going to kill us all, and the robots will take over, blah 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 blah, or just kind of again dismissing that outright. So we have to be somewhere in the middle, and we have to work with what we have, and we have to critically think about that technology, because again, it's here to stay. And whether you are the artist or you're a developer or you are an attorney, you can make use of that technology, but it's up to you how you will do that. So I believe everybody has to gain from that technology, everybody. But we have to do it in a responsible way, not just by copying somebody else's work outright. And I don't believe that generative AI, when applied in the art world, right? So art generated by the AI will just kind of take over, and there will be no more artists, no more creators, no more musicians. There will be, because humans are capable of creating something original, right?
And
There has to be
adapting.
some, yes, there has to be some, there will always be some originality, kind of like that's the human thing.
Condition. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
machines can't do that. Yes, they are good at uh, working with data, analyzing data, generating information, input, output, all great. But to come up with some original or novel idea, right? That's not what they do, and that's not what they can
Exactly.
do, at least for the time being. I
hmm
don't know what's going to happen. Let's talk about it in a year. But
or a
I'm
week.
joking. But yeah, I mean, who knows? Next weekend. But other than that, it's like when the machine has been trained on the images of bananas and apples and fruits, right? There's no way the output will be, I don't know, a car, because
hmm
whatever has been the input, like all the
hmm
data that's been trained on, there won't be any original output, like other than what's been already sort of devoured by the machine, right?
Yeah.
But the human brain can't do that. And some people are kind of, I've heard people say, like, they use parallels, like, well, the AI is some sort of just working the same, the AI art is kind of the same thing as the all the artists. They've been inspired by somebody else's work, somebody, they saw something somewhere in the childhood, or just, I don't know,
Mm.
last week. So the inspiration, right, that they had. The same for the AI model. It's been sort of inspired by being trained on the data, except for the fact it hasn't, because it's a little bit being inspired by something. It's a little more subtle than just being fed all the data, right?
Mm.
And a lot of that data is copyrighted, versus I've been inspired by somebody else's work, and it was in my head, and the vision of that work kind of triggered something in me, some creative process, and the original idea came to mind, which is my idea, but it sort of was influenced by something else, right? So those two
Yeah.
things, I think, need to be separated. It doesn't work the same thing. The AI model and the AI algorithm can be inspired by something.
For
It's
sure.
predicting text, is generating synthetic images. That's it.
Yep. You've put that really beautifully. I think your example there of if you train on apples, bananas, you're not going to get a car is so true. And I think people are often looking at these AI tools and thinking, wow, this is coming up with so much new stuff. But actually, I think, and I think many would agree, perhaps you'd agree as well, that what we're seeing is interpolation, but really impressive interpolation. Like it turns out in all of human history, there's still a lot of holes in this massive latent space of human creativity. And I think AI sometimes finds those holes. But I don't think what it does is, like you say, take it from beyond the known into something that it seems to be only us humans can do, which is extrapolate. I do think all AI models at the moment are interpolation machines, very, very impressive ones, but they are looking at the data they've been trained on and finding holes, not because they're goal orientated, like you say, but because we've told them to through a prompt. And that, that is impressive. That's an impressive feat, but it's certainly not the human condition. Because I think if you take all of science up until, say, 1910, and you ask it about general relativity and ask it to discover it, I don't think it would be able to do it at the moment. I don't think so. So something's missing. The human genius, I feel, is that leap, and the artistic genius, not just scientific genius, that leap that takes you from, I don't know, music up until the 1960s to 1980s, like dance and synth and disco in the 70s. It's that leap of something new that wasn't here before, and now it is. It's not just producing more tracks that sound like the Beatles or a blur of the Beatles and Elvis or whatever. It's producing something new. So would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. And I wanted to make parallels to, I'm going to use a very smart term, Moravec's paradox.
Mm-hmm. You're going to have to tell me what that
don't
is.
cut it out. Don't cut it out. It sounds very smart. So obviously, but whoever doesn't know, Google it. Joking. So
I have no idea, so you're going to have to tell me.
So basically, the paradox is it's very easy for the computer to play chess or do data analysis or do like huge mathematical equations and stuff like that, but it's very difficult for people to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
To get the skill, and vice versa. It's very difficult for a robot to do just everyday human things, as in walking or taking a cup of
Make a cup
coffee
of
and
tea.
drinking,
Mm-hmm.
right? And playing football, walking straight, right? From point A to
Mm-hmm.
point B. Those are the things that are very, very tricky for a robot. But for a human, you don't even think twice before you do that. But when come to think of it, how your brain works, in order for me to get this mug of coffee and drink from it, there has to be a series of commands and kind of
Mm-hmm.
points my brain goes through for me to do that, right? So, but I don't even think about it. The same goes to for the AI, right? So where the parallel is this human creativity and the spark of originality, right? You can't, as even at least at this stage, you can't really replicate that. It's kind of still, like you said, something is missing, this human factor.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely agree with people when they say it's about this AI explosion, recent explosion, right? It's about humanity, and it's about us, in essence, being superior to that. And I'm actually kind of shocked, like how people are quickly to dismiss themselves as just
Mm.
being superior, like, yeah, I will take over all our jobs, we're gone, we're just basically finished, yeah, it was gonna be there, just I have nothing more to do, basically. Why
Yeah.
you just What happened there? Just kind of, you are who you are, own it. You are a person, a human. You have tons of
Yeah.
ideas. You have tons of potential. Just kind of, you have the agency. Just go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Take
Fight
control.
back, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, but it was surprising to, like, the sentiment of the people. It's just, oh yeah, okay. It's just, I give up. It's just,
We're done.
yeah. So it's. I mean, I'm not. I don't think it's the end. It's only the beginning. It's exciting one, because obviously not as exciting in terms of regulations. We don't have
Mm-hmm.
any. But in terms of everything else, how it's going to affect our work, how we interact with the people around us, obviously with the technology and the educational aspect of it, as you mentioned before. You've been speaking with some people who work in the educational sector, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
even even my kids, how they interact with it. So I have three kids. My daughter is 9, and my son is 7. The other son is 4. But the older two, so I kind of just, when I introduced them to ChatGPT, I had to.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
The first question they asked it was, "Is God real?"
Wow, that's pretty deep.
Who who does that? I mean, And I was like, have I just failed as a parent? Or like, shouldn't you guys be asking like some, I'm sorry to say, like dumb questions? But the first question they literally typed in, I was like, okay, that didn't go as planned. But that's what I'm saying. The interaction, even like for our kids, right? Sometimes when my son, and he loves asking very very hard questions, especially before bedtime. Sometimes I'm feeling like I have to read up on some material, and he's very interested in space, and I have to be interested in that as well, and I have to be ready. So most of the times I'm kind of feeling the pressure. And lately he's been kind of asking like, so what's the dark matter? About the black holes, and how far is the nearest black hole from our planet? So I'm like, okay, let's just let's do some googling, or well, chat gpt might explain you something, but again, you have to verify that
But you could
information.
ask ChatGPT to rephrase it in a way that a 9-year-old could understand,
Yes,
right?
yes, exactly, so that's been
Maybe
very
not nine.
helpful.
Your 9-year-old is super smart, so he'd probably need it at like PhD level, right? And yeah,
Soon I'm pretty sure soon I'll be a phd, like something that's just space science or something like that. Because yeah, the amount of questions is extraordinary. But
yeah.
yeah,
I think
that aside.
yeah, that's pretty cool. The first question I think I asked ChatGPT was, "Does a worm have a brain?" So different, your son, me, similar kind of line of inquiry. Um, so just to go back to the sort of the legal aspect of what we're seeing at the moment and what we're witnessing, it reminds me a bit of an art movement, I guess, called appropriation, which is partly taking others' art and doing something with it. So Warhol
Mhm.
being a perfect example of this.
Yeah.
And I know there are, on very high level, I understand, what's going on, but I think there's a case at the moment involving um, his foundation or his people, and um,
Hmm.
through his artworks of prints, because I think there's a claim there that they're effectively, these were used basically under copyright, and that he's basically used the work in a derivative way that
Yeah.
infringes on the copyright of the original photo. And there is a kind of parallel there to what we're now seeing with generative AI, where it's about how far do we take appropriation, and how much overlap is there, and how much precedent is there with human
Yeah.
generated art. So because I guess AI art, there is no precedent because we've never seen anything like this, but can we relate it to a human case like the Warhol case and say, well, we're going to have to treat AI art in the same way that we treated this case, because there's direct parallels here between this and other forms of copyright. Are you familiar with that case? And I don't know if you can sort of talk a little bit
Yeah.
around that.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like you said, we have no precedent, but we have the cases that sort of just have the similar facts, apart from the fact that we're dealing with generative AI, right? And the talking about appropriation art, Carew versus Prince, the case that was decided, I believe, in 2018, kind of made it noticeable, appropriation
Mm-hmm.
art, if we talk about it. So there were several pictures at issue that were appropriated by an artist, and the court found a few of them were essentially fair use, and
Mm-hmm.
they were transformative enough to be to be using the fair use defense, and some of them were not. And it's it's tricky because when it comes to AI art, again, there are a lot of variations and unknowns, and I don't know. Just again, the case law has been sort of all over the place on this, and
Mm-hmm.
you can't really tell which way it's gonna go. But the arguments are good on both sides. So it's just, yeah, it's been kind of, again, I would like to give some cool and definitive answer. It's gonna be,
But it just doesn't exist yet, right?
yeah, again, that's what makes it so fascinating. That's we're all in this space, kind of following the cases and just trying to keep up with everything else. But it's just we'll see how it goes, I guess, because yeah, it's definitely the one to look out for.
Cool. I got the echo back, by the way. I can hear
Mm.
myself in my headphones. I don't know if it's coming through yours. No.
I don't know. I don't have anything.
I tell you
Nothing
what I
is
might
working
do.
anymore.
No, this has
You
been
always
such a
think
great conversation so far. Thanks for doing this. I'm gonna, if it's possible, I'm gonna leave this conversation and rejoin and see if I can get the echo to go
or
away.
if it's still kind of present, I can turn my headphones off. I don't know. Maybe it's gonna
Okay.
be
Yeah,
better.
I don't know. Sometimes they're off or on works better. It's got a bit better now. Maybe it was my microphone. You can hear me fine. Yeah. Um, if you say something else, and then I'll just talk over the top and see if that works.
I'm saying something else.
Okay, yeah, it's gone away. Okay, that's weird. Okay, we'll cut all of that out, obviously. Right, I was going to ask you. Yeah, yeah, that's super interesting, and I think one of the things we're going to have to talk about as well on this podcast is the fact that some of these pieces of art have been found to crop up even after the model has been trained, but almost through in the weights, it seems to have remembered certain art pieces, and I suppose this is part of the strength of the argument on the side of the people who are accusing the model makers of copyright infringement, which is that it's not the case that you can honestly say it doesn't remember anything about the input artwork, because in many cases it's producing it in pretty faithful representation, and it's not just a case of, well, it's got the general style, but it's actually got everything: the form, the color, the shape, the intent of the artist is there. So
Yeah.
I guess the model trainers haven't really realized, or at least when they put these models out there, they haven't tested, is whether you can find artwork in the weights, and if you with the right prompt can actually get it to output a faithful copy, because I think that weakens their argument significantly that it's not remembering. What would you
Yeah.
say to that? Would you say that that strengthens the case on the side of the accusers here?
Yeah. I agree with that because again, the argument here would be how the substantial similarity factor, right? So how is the derivative work substantially similar to the original work, right? And everything that you just enumerated kind of just aligns with the point that it's been sort of just recreated completely, so if all the elements that make this copyrighted work the work, right, they have been recreated, so why would you claim it's fair use?
Mm.
Because the output in the end is generated output is might be used for commercial purposes, might be used for anything else, right? So
Mm.
print it out on a t-shirt and used it in multiple ways, so the fair use argument kind of fails there
Exactly, and
drastically.
yeah, I think if you can't just treat the AI as a black box through which some transformation process happens uniquely and uh, uniformly across all art. I think some artworks are going to be transformed a lot more than others, basically, and that some you will probably find very faithful reconstructions of in the outputs if you try hard enough and you put in the right weights. Whereas others, actually, you're not going to find any faithful reconstructions of. So there's a fair use to be said there.
Yeah,
So I think you're right, though, that this is going to be on a case by case basis. You can't probably place a blanket rule across everything.
I was just gonna say that so the Chris Kashtanova, the artist that we spoken about earlier, so after the US Copyright Office issued their guidance on the AI generated art, so she came up with a different project of hers, and so this time she documented everything from start to finish. So she was working with the AI algorithm again. I believe it was Midjourney. I don't want to confuse anyone. And
Mm-hmm.
but this time she filed for application for copyright registration. This time she kind of just came up with the sketch She did the work. She documented everything, right? So step by step, from the moment she came up with a sketch of the work, Rose Enigma, the work is called, and she did everything. It was hand drawn, and then she did it using Photoshop, and then there was the AI tools, and then there was this and that. So there's several. As a matter of fact, a lot of steps involved in the creating of this work, right? Sufficient prompts and very, very, very substantial description of the whole creative process, I would say. So this time she filed for copyright registration again, and it's going to be very interesting to see how it's going to go, because obviously it's going to be different. And I love the fact that she keeps challenging the US Copyright Office. I mean, believe more artists should start doing this. We need some incentives, we need some guidance, and we need it right now, as a matter of fact, because again, the train is leaving. It probably already left, and we're kind of still here trying to discuss the need for guidance and regulation, but we sort of need it yesterday.
Yeah, that comes to this other angle around. Oh, sorry, I got the echo back again. It's fine. It goes away after a while. It's weird. Yeah, so I guess this comes to the second point here, which is that it's not just about the legal cases between the model trainers and the artists, but then actual AI artists. So people using these tools and wanting to copyright their work. That's a separate issue. And am I right in thinking that the guidance on this obviously isn't clear at the moment in any country, but that, say, if I was using Midjourney and I wanted to use that image commercially, I can do that. But am I right to say I can't copyright that image, or what's the current sort of what's the current status of these different tools?
So currently there's no regulation concerning AI generated art, right? But the closest we have to kind of sort of rules, these are not rules per se, the US Copyright Office's guidance, which again, based on the Chris Kastanova's case, is that you cannot copyright separate images that you created by using AI, right? It doesn't matter what platform or what model you use, and but you can copyright the layout, the arrangement of the works,
Oh,
the
interesting.
text,
Okay.
and everything. But just if you were to use Midjourney right now, come up with a very, very fancy image and go to the Copyright Office, right? US Copyright Office, be like, register my work. They would not, based on the fact that it has to be the author has to be it has to be human. So the US copyright law basically says the author cannot be anyone else, just a human being, So the famous monkey selfie case, where the US Copyright Office, that was decided in 2018, I believe, US Copyright Office again said a monkey cannot be an author, unfortunately, for all the monkey lovers out there. So it didn't work out. So basically, no AI can be an author, at least at this stage. But I think the US Copyright Office, what they did state was a prompt can be copyrighted, like a prompt itself, if it's kind of creative enough. Again, this modicum, let's remember the modicum of creativity, right? So if it's creative enough, it might be copyrighted, but not the image itself.
I can see why this is a gray area.
Yeah. Oh, so very gray and very murky, and a lot of gray and murky words out there.
Yeah, it's good for AI IP lawyers. I was going to say though that, I mean, suppose what this comes down to ultimately is, so I can understand why, if I just go and stick any prompt into Midjourney and then I say this is my original work, that it feels very wrong to say to people, yeah, you can copyright that, and suddenly now I can sue anyone who uses that image on their website. It's just a picture that I spent like 30 seconds producing, and I can't, otherwise I might as well just stick loads of prompts through, and I've just created loads of images, stick them on the web, and then just farm, people using them and see if I can get some cases out of it. That feels wrong. But I guess on the other side, if somebody has poured hours and hours of their own time into producing something that really truly reflects something that's meaningful to them in an artistic sense, and also it's not easy for someone to just go in and do what they just did. That there is a case there to say, actually, yeah, like you can't now just take this image because this is my image and I've poured a lot of my hours of my life into. But then there's such a gray area, isn't it? Because like, where do you draw the line between those two use cases?
Yeah, I know, and
Yeah.
it's also that's where in my point of view, the U.S. Copyright Office gets it wrong, right? To me, I think a good argument is if it's sufficiently original and creative, the prompt, right? All the ideas that you poured into your work, this can and should be copyrightable, you know. But the obviously U.S. office doesn't agree as of at least for now, so it needs to be seen still. But
Out of
it's
interest,
again, it's yeah.
Just a follow-up question to that. What happens if you produce it using, say, Midjourney? Let's take them as an example. Do you need to declare that it's produced by Midjourney if you wanted to copyright it, or could you say like, no, I did this myself?
That's the thing. That's the thing. You sort of need to declare, but you might just omit that fact, right?
Yeah,
And
or transform it and use it as a starting point.
Yeah, and who's gonna know? I mean,
Yeah.
where's this again? This the gray area, but where's the line? How do we find out? How does the U.S. Copyright Office finds out that I created that image by using Photoshop or by using Midjourney or Stable Diffusion? There's no way of telling. So, in fact, the U.S. Copyright Office kind of just relying on your good faith at this point, right? So being upfront with them, but maybe people won't. Where's the incentive for that? You know, knowing that my work won't be definitely copyrighted if I disclose that fact. So it's very tricky.
Yeah, I can see that.
Really
It feels so different as well from plagiarism, where you can say you have plagiarized this work because I can see that the words here are the same as the words here, or that you've changed, a few of the adjectives around, but ultimately the whole paragraph is identical. And same with AI art, you can say, well, same with normal plagiarism in art, that you can say, look, you've basically taken the entire concept of this piece, and there's a case that you can form against it because it's ultimately human versus human. But I suppose it's very difficult, isn't it, when you have a piece of AI art that may be produced initially by AI, but has undergone its own transformation process after the fact by the artist who's stamping their own style onto it, or it's gone through other digital transformation steps. And then to sort of say, well, you still can't copyright it. It's like, well, where does it start becoming copyrightable? If I get the inspiration from a Midjourney image, but I never use that image itself, I just take the concept of it. I mean,
exactly. And going back to the U.S. Copyright Office, the topic I will never leave alone, but it's so fascinating. So the other argument for them denying the Chris Kostanova's copyright in the individual images was the fact that the creator didn't have sufficient control over the output, right? So every time sort of you generate, you write a prompt and you hit generate, the output will be different. So there's no sufficient control in the output by the creator. And again, this can be argued on like in different ways, using Pollock analogy, right? So everybody knows how Pollock would do his very, very expensive works, right? So how is that different? How could Pollock predict which way this paint splatters would fall, right, on the canvas, or how it's gonna end up looking? The outputs were, in that case, pretty much different every single time he worked, right? So here, the argument of there being not sufficient control, creative control for that matter, is kind of just, I don't know, it doesn't seem very, very convincing to me. So but again, it can be argued both ways.
Yeah, it feels like part of the artistic process is the randomness inherent in the way that the brush hits the canvas, or the way that the Yeah, the way that this particular piece of rock is different from any other rock, and you're sculpting it. It feels weird to say, well, unless you can create it again, then you can't copyright it. It doesn't really.
Yeah, and some people are talking about this about the AI generated work is in terms of just the same as work for hire, for example, right? So using, for example, me using Midjourneys would be the same. I'm giving prompts. I'm telling the machine, I'm telling the algorithm what to do, and it does it, right? So it's sort of the same way as with work for hire, right? I hire an artist. I tell the artist what to do, and he does it. So how is that different? To me, it's different because I still don't have sufficient control over the artist I hired to work for me, because every time the artist does something, the output might be different. So I'll still need to tweak some things, right? So the same with the prompts and Midjourney. So I will still be tweaking all the prompts and the image until the image that I see kind of aligns with the image in my head, right? So, but how, like the same thing is with the work for hire. I'll be telling the artist I hired to redo the work and redo it again and tweak here and tweak there until I have the vision, my vision aligns with the output of the artist produced. So to me, it's kind of, you know, I think it's similar.
Yeah, I can see there's definitely crossover there.
Yeah, so again, not having sufficient creative control argument is, it can be argued. Again, gray area.
Gray area. Yeah, I guess it forms part of a whole a whole bag of ideas that sort of knock around with these kind of, when we talk about these things. So ownership and creative control, reproducibility, ease and sweat of the brow, I guess, and how much effort something has gone into something. You can't just pick any one of these and say, well, the reason it should be allowed or disallowed is because of this one reason. I guess, part of the reason we're going to have to be talking about this long beyond, I guess, this year and beyond, is that it's complex. It's really, really complex, and without precedent. I wanted to ask you as well briefly about another one of your passions, which is, I believe, blockchain technology. And I've heard from others that there might be a potential use here for blockchain technology to better attribute ownership to especially digitally created art. I don't know if you could just give us a brief summary of where, if anywhere, this technology can be applied, and just give us a background to what it is and how it might be used in future.
Well, where blockchain comes in terms of the digital art, right, and digital artworks, is first and foremost the ability to attribute works. So the way of it, I'm pretty sure you know the way the blockchain works. So it's everything stays permanently. Nothing, no information can be tampered with, and kind of just it's a permanent record that stays on the blockchain, and that's what makes it so important when it comes to art attribution. So this permanent record will go with this piece of an NFT if we're talking about digital art, right? So it might as well be an NFT. So it's gonna go with this NFT everywhere it goes. And what else? What other more sufficient and way of attributing an artwork there can be? I mean, to me, the answer is obvious. I hope that it gets kind of traction and people use blockchain for those purposes, and at least start considering using those purposes. I've been talking with a few people lately, and they have very very cool a very cool project on the way that does exactly that. So it gets the all the images, like the digital image, or it can be a video or an audio, everywhere if you put it on Instagram or social media or anything. So apart from having a watermark, it has all the information of that image and everything attached to that digital information, right? So it's gonna travel with that image everywhere it goes. Sort of, I cannot just copy and paste your image. This information, it's gonna go together with whatever I'm doing. So I can't just, if I copy paste it, it's gonna be recorded on the blockchain. If I'm a photographer and you're a magazine, for example, and you didn't, without asking me, right, you use my image in your online magazine, it's going to be recorded automatically on the blockchain. And as the creator, I will be in full right to ask you for remuneration, right? So and when you're going to ask me, how are you going to prove that I use your image without your consent, right? So you don't have anything, you don't have a contract, for example. So, and I'm going to use the blockchain records and everything from point A to point, I don't know, B, and everything in between, like all the steps that happen in order to prove my case. So the use of this technology is I mean, it's unbelievable. And I'm just saddened by the fact that a lot of people out there are still sort of just very, very, very negative about it. And apart from the fact that the NFT notion, like the NFT itself, kind of been a little muddied lately, and the people kind of have this like negative connotation at this point. But again, all the projects that were there kind of for the hype and for the money, everything is gone now. From here on out, it's gonna just, I'm pretty sure it's gonna get better, and the people who are really in it for the technology will stay and have stayed, and it's gonna get even more value. So to me, the important aspect of it is to educate people, to tell people more about it, because it's so funny when people just dismissing the technology outright. And it doesn't matter what we're talking about, the blockchain, NFTs, right, the AI. They're ready to dismiss it all without even getting to know anything about it. It's easier to kind of dismiss it and just not to waste your time, and that's it, and move on with your life. But I don't think that's the right approach.
So maybe it's a technology that was always in need of a use case, and that, it came a bit before its time, but generative AI is the use case that it was always meant to solve. Same with blockchain. I guess it seems like a perfect sort of fit, sort of hand to glove kind of use case for it. And so I wonder if it will start gaining traction again. I'm sure you've seen that sort of hype cycle curve where, it goes up and everyone goes crazy for it. And then suddenly there's this plummets and no one talks about it. And then suddenly people who stay in the technology realize, okay, finally we found the use case that this was always meant for, and it gains traction again. So maybe those two technologies there that you mentioned have finally found their use case, and they were just a bit ahead of their time.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And it's just, again, that we're still so early, and to just dismiss everything outright is just plain stupid to me. So before you dismiss that, at least try to do some research, try to read about it, try to talk to some people. And I understand it can be challenging. It's very hard to comprehend, right, the way the blockchain works and the crypto and digital wallets and NFTs, generative AI and GANs and transformers and all the beautiful stuff. To somebody like me, it's fascinating, right? And I can't read enough about it. That's what I'm doing in my own free time. Whenever I have free time, my friends just been calling me very weird names lately. It's just like, who does this with their free time? Elena, you are not very helpful.
I do that as well.
That's what I do, because it's so fascinating. How can you not do that?
Yeah.
But
Tell me about
some
it.
people it's different.
Yeah. It's very true. The last thing I kind of wanted to touch on as well, this is a bit of a different area, I guess, but I guess the legal profession in general has been talked about as one that is under threat from generative AI technologies. So not specifically AI art or IP law, but just generally the concept of law being about being able to ingest lots and lots of documents and understand them in depth and wade through lots of terminology that's often very opaque to produce a summary or to produce an opinion about something or a balanced view. I mean, that what I've described there is something that I guess something like GPT-4 is kind of perfectly designed to do.
Mhm.
And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on whether you think there are parts of the profession that are under threat from these technologies, or if you think there's a use case for them as a tool, just like we use other tools in different professions. What's
Mhm.
your view on of how it should be used going forward?
Well, to put everyone that is there, I don't think it's as of today. Again, today,
Mm-hmm.
next weekend, different day. So as of today, I don't think it threatens attorneys' future whatsoever. As a matter of fact, some of the huge companies are pretty much embracing it in terms of it's a good marketing, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when we're talking about Bing, and obviously it's connected to the internet, and you get all the links and stuff when you're Googling, trying to get some information, they are welcoming that in terms of they're getting the word about their law firms
Mm-hmm.
just by people typing in prompts and trying to find more about it, right? And here goes their law firm or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So they are pretty much embracing it as long as it doesn't kind of get into the legal aspect of things. So the moment the Bing starts giving legal advice and just saying
Mm-hmm.
this is attributed to this and this attorney and the law firm, so as long as it doesn't go back to them in this regards, right? So they are pretty much fine with this. But again, we are very far away from ChatGPT or Bing or Bard is the
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna ask
Being
your
used as a
opinion who's the best later. But it's just we are not here anymore, and we are not here yet, and the attorneys are safe and fine, and it's gonna be, and it already is, a very useful tool. People just need to know how to work with that tool. It's
mm-hmm.
obviously I've spoken with so many people, and a lot of them, again, they're dismissing that when we're talking about ChatGPT, they're dismissing that just, and I understand the only reason why is because they don't know how to use it. And they're like, so I tried it for this and for that, and it kind of didn't work, and the answers were lame. And but that's
Mm.
you have so many more options and so much more freedom in terms of how you choose to use that technology. And as an attorney, it can be very useful. So I don't think we should be scared. It's gonna replace
Yeah.
attorneys anytime soon.
What you said there is very reflective of my opinion with regards to coding. I mean, my profession is in programming, and running a consultancy that builds solutions for clients. So, I often get asked, do you think this is a threat? And I would give the answer that you gave there, which is that, we're doing a lot more than just churning out code. And same with the legal profession, is doing a lot more than just writing more text as a result of text that is input into you. So I think it's for us at the moment, it feels very much like a turbocharging tool. We can do a lot more than we used to be able to do, but it's not something that actually I would be comfortable giving somebody with no programming background at all, because they won't know what to do if it goes wrong, or to check if it's working correctly in the first place. And I should think it's the same with the legal profession, that you really wouldn't want someone not understanding law in detail to be using these tools, because ultimately they won't be able to sense check the output, and it needs to be validated still.
I agree because obviously all those text to text, right, ChatGPT uh, models, they tend to, the word, hallucinate. They
Mm-hmm.
tend to give you absolutely absolutely incorrect and just made up answers, made up cases, made up everything. So again, even with when you're working uh with those as a tool, you still need to be proactively checking and use your critical thinking, right? So if even if I'm working with the generated output that ChatGPT did for me, right? So kind of just draft me something, I will still be checking and triple checking everything. Still kind of
Mm-hmm.
the I have the agency here. I'm not just kind of just blindly copy pasting it wherever I go, right? You still need to check and you need to verify. So it's nowhere near the point where you can just be confidently asking it some question. At least I wouldn't do that, right? but the case might be different for some other people. So confidently asking it something and just be very confident that you're getting the right and sound response, which is not the case some of the time. So still, I would just urge everyone kind of just to stay vigilant. It's a very useful tool, but it makes mistakes, and you need to be aware of that, and you need to kind of use your critical thinking and just check all the information that comes out of it.
Just like any other human in your team, I guess, if you were working with them, you wouldn't sort of just say, well, that's the perfect employee, so I'm just going to pass everything through them. Someone also needs to check their work. So I agree with that. Last thing I wanted to ask you, it's been fascinating talking to you, by the way, Elena. I think we could probably talk for a long time more about all of the different implications of this technology, but we're coming to the end of the episode, unfortunately. So I just want to end with a question about what the future looks like. It's something we always ask all of our guests on the AI Canvas. Are you optimistic, pessimistic? What's your view of the next 10 years for the legal profession and beyond?
I am an optimist by nature. Sometimes it's a very unfortunate trait. Sometimes I'm too optimistic, but I am very optimistic. I think it's a great opportunity for everyone, starting from, I don't know, education, medicine, law, art, whatever area of the aspect of our life, you name it, right? I mean, the trip you're planning to go to, kind of ideas for that. So just starting with those miscellaneous things and just finishing with some hugely important ones. And I think it's the importance of what happened and how this technology exploded in the recent, like since November, since ChatGPT came out, right? It can be understated, and I'm very optimistic. And the only problem is with my optimism is that we need to critically fast find the ways to responsibly deploy and use the AI and integrate it into our lives, because it has, if done wrong, it has huge implications, legal implications for everyone involved, and it has to be considered as well.
Yeah, it feels like we're walking to the top of a very lovely mountain, but we're on a cliff edge at the same time. So yeah, we need to get to the top, but we also need to take all those precautions that you just mentioned there as to the ethical, but also kind of just straightforward legal implications of what we're doing, and making sure we're not stepping on people's toes and doing things in the way that's not going to benefit humanity in the long run. Because we need artists, we need creative people on side. And I think that's important to note, is that this shouldn't be adversarial between artists and AI. It shouldn't be a fight. We need to find a common ground that I think works for everybody. And maybe just to finish off, your thoughts on something like Adobe Firefly, which is being trained on just open images and not anything that's copyrightable. It seems like they're kind of doing this the right way, and it's produced an amazingly powerful tool. And funnily enough, probably if that came first, and you're now asking, should we include copyright images to make it even better? People would be like, nah, probably not. This is good enough. We'll stick with this. We don't want the legal implications of it. But it's because it's happened the other way around that it feels like, is this a small step backwards?
Yeah. No, I think Adobe did the right move there. Kind of, they just kind of were very cautious to work with that, to incorporate AI and to just kind of use the algorithm and stuff. So and it's a very good tool. I've been using it since the day it came out, and I'm very, very happy with the results. And this is the framework that kind of, like you said, it would have been lovely if it was used by other companies to implement, right? But again, it's good that some companies at least think about that. And
maybe that's the future.
We'll see. Maybe, but the licensing, it's definitely one of the answers that can be solving the situation, I believe. So if creators and the companies and the AI developers, everybody works together, these issues can be resolved. But again, for that to happen, everybody kind of seems to just needs to be on the same page for that.
Yeah, totally agree. Elena, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you on the AI Canvas. Really fascinating lines of conversation. I've learned so much as well about the implications of this technology for law and for ethical reasons. So thanks again, and all the best for the future.
Thank you so much, David.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Cool. So thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you for.
And
everything.
I forgot to say that none of whatever I said was not legal advice, so don't listen to me.
Oh,
I
yes, of course.
That, right?
Yeah. No, don't worry. We'll make sure we can put something in the description if you need us to. But honestly,
yeah, probably.
yeah.
Usually, like smart attorneys kind of get into that. Like,
everything they say. Yeah, no, yeah. Don't worry.
Whatever I'm gonna say.
Yeah, no, that's cool. If you want to send us across a little paragraph, I can put it in the description if you want me to.
You can just do it. I mean, it's pretty standard, I believe. Like.
Oh, okay. Yeah, cool. I'll find something. No, but seriously, that was the best conversation ever. Thank you so much for jumping on.
No, I don't know. I was so nervous. My face is so red. I hope it's not gonna be as red when. Can you just maybe just Photoshop everything?
We got AI tools to help us these days.
Deep fake my face with my like more natural face, and we didn't even touch upon the deep fakes. I wanted to mention the fact that I was closely following the elections.
Oh yeah, let's do it. We're still recording, so should we just do a quick? We can slot it in somewhere.
Yeah. Because it's been mind blowing, and my friend, she's an attorney, and she lives in Turkey, and she's kind of like keeping me up to date, and it's just. Yeah.
Cool. Let's do it. I've got time, so if you've got time, yeah. We could literally talk another hour. Okay, so I'll try and phrase it in a way that makes it sound like I've sort of naturally just segued into this. Okay, so specifically about so deepfakes, but political like misinformation, all that sort of stuff, right? Yeah. Okay. So I've got to ask you as well about the rise of deepfakes again. I mean, this is something that we saw in, I guess, 2018 was the start of it, even perhaps slightly before that, and how at the time it was being used to create videos of people that weren't real and put words into people's mouths. And it's rearing its ugly head again, I think, with the elections, both in the US, Turkey. What's your view on this technology and whether it should be allowed in political advertising? What's your sort of take on it, and where do you see it going?
Well, the use of the deepfakes, unfortunately, was something expected, because it's not the first time people are using it for political purposes, right? To influence voters or to swing opinions. As early as I believe last year, that when there was a deepfake of President Zelensky, kind of just addressing his troops and all the Ukrainians and just urging everyone to, just give up and finish the war. And when we're talking about the elections, so recently, you might know that when President Biden announced he's gonna be running for re-election, and the next day, I believe this deepfake video came out with him and Vice President Kamala Harris. And what happened if they did, in fact, win the re-election, right? And the use of this technology for these purposes is astounding, but it's not unexpected, and it's very scary. And we, unfortunately, are there. And unfortunately, it's working. People are not very particular when they are fed some information on social media and just pretty much all over the place. They don't really like to check their sources, I would say.
No,
and
there's not time, is there? Sometimes,
yeah, there's obviously like the average attention span of person's like what 7 seconds, right? So that's all it takes for you to register. Nobody's gonna go and check the sources or anything. And recently, especially this weekend, the presidential election in Turkey, so far it hasn't come out in any way. There hasn't been a decision. There hasn't been a winner, because none of the candidates gained more than 50% of the votes. So it will be decided, I believe, like in 2 weeks time. But again, the deepfake technology also was used by the party to kind of just drag the opposition through the mud, right? So different types of images, deepfake images of the presidential runner-up, kind of just using all the technology they could to swing the voters, to swing the opinion, to make people believe all types of stuff, right? So, and I think it sort of worked, but it sort of didn't, since President Erdogan didn't get the 50% needed. But still, the use of this technology for these purposes is something we need to be very, very aware of, and we need to be, as a society, we need to be very, very proactive on. And it's not enough to kind of just be talking about it, right? We need some regulations, we need some system in place to tackle those things, right? We need some tools to be able to be able to know to know what's real
What
or
is
what's
real?
not real at this point, right? I mean, what do we, if before the excuse, not even the excuse, the explanation would be like, so I'm seeing what I'm seeing, so, and I'm hearing what I'm hearing, so that's that, right? I'm gonna believe my eyes and ears. But as of today, the sentiment is, don't believe your eyes and ears anymore, right? So with the amount
What
of
do you
synthetic
believe?
content, out there, pretty much anyone would be able to be like, oh, this wasn't me, it was defect of me, right? And where are the tools for me to prove you wrong in that sense,
Exactly.
right? And we need to be protected, and everybody, especially in politics, when it's so easy to just manipulate people, and it's very
You've
scary.
hit you've hit the nail on the head there, which is basically comes down to a question of what is real and what is fake. And there's always going to be a case where what is real for you is fake for me, and vice versa, because we see the world through different eyes, and we don't have an objective reality. We're all subjective human beings making our own mind up about what we're seeing. But I think you're right to say that there needs to be a line drawn between something that is dressed up to be real, that has been knowingly created as a fake. That for me feels, yeah, it feels counterproductive to democracy, because ultimately democracy hinges on the very fact that we can make our decisions rationally and based on factually correct information, or at least as factually correct as possible. But it's always been the case that has been under threat. And I think you're right to say that we need to be really, really vigilant here, that we don't push the boundaries too far. That there will always be, won't there? There will always be the bending of the truth by politicians for their own political gain. I don't think we're going to
And
see the end
there
of that.
always has been, but we
Exactly.
didn't have the tools this sufficient, where you are
Yeah.
not able to tell the truth. And
Mm.
yeah, this is just, I don't want to use the word scary a lot, but that's what I tend to use when I use the word
Mm.
deepfakes in the same context.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Great area though, isn't it? Because you could say, well, what about a photoshopped image of somebody on it was taken on a sunny day and they made it look like it was a rainy day because they changed the background color, and what, or a video clip that was taken out of context and it's the same video clip, but you just clipped it to make it sound like they were saying something different. Now, is that a deep fake, or is that a just clever marketing of the opposition party? I don't
Yeah.
think we have answers anyway to this kind of question. And like you say, that there, who is the body that oversees this? They have to be some partisan body that sort of sits in between and says what is AI and what is not AI. And it just gets so messy so quickly, doesn't it? Have you seen any sort of movements legally in terms of sort of whether it's bodies being set up or people starting to talk and make a noise in this space about the dangers of this kind of advertising? Do you know of anything in the US where that there are movements to kind of correct this, or at least put in some legislation or regulation?
So far, the, the only thing that I've heard is just pretty much talks, but at least talking about it, I mean, at least
Start.
for now, yeah. But as we come closer to the elections in the US, I'm pretty sure, and the use of this technology will be widespread, and nobody knows what's going to happen. And the closer we get to the election, the more pronounced the talks will be and discussions will be around the subject. And maybe that probably will trigger something else, some response. But again,
Especially
gray
as, I mean,
area.
this isn't. Yeah, I think that's the headline of this talk is like there's a lot of murkiness in AI law at the moment. But that's as it is to be expected. I mean, it's so new, isn't it? Yeah, I suppose, the scary thing as well is it's in the hands of the everyday person. This isn't a technology that maybe a few companies have the ability to generate photographs like this or text like this. Everybody can now generate whatever they want, imagery or text. And
Yeah, but is it though? I mean, what's scarier? The technology that's open source and it's at the hands of everyone, like me and you, right? Or this technology is in the hands of a few conglomerates that can pretty much direct the future.
I suppose the models are, I would say, largely at the moment in the hands of the commercial companies, but the open source community is catching up pretty quickly. And I think that's even scarier because then you have the actual model itself is in control of the everyday person, not just the output. I suppose what I was referring to is your point there about the fact that anyone can produce misinformation very, very quickly these days, rather than it just being like something that takes ages to produce.
And it has been, as a matter of fact. I've been recently reading an article when they were saying that text to text generators, right? So people literally generating news outlets, fake news outlets all over the internet. They've counted about, I don't know, 70, right? So these news outlets, they have fake news generated by AI, and I think that they're making money simply just by they're doing some advertisement or something like that. But
that's
still,
all they need. Yeah,
we're talking about 70, right, roughly. But how many more will there be later on, right? And there's no need to pay anyone for coming up with some fake articles and stuff, right? You just generate everything pretty much very easily. 3 seconds, ChatGPT comes up with a fake article for you, and just it's there. And the news outlets are there, and people are reading it. Okay, maybe not as much people are reading it, but somebody's reading it, right? And the more widespread it becomes, and it's very easy to create that, and it's very easy to generate that, and
and it has
the
the power to
implications of
change.
this.
Yeah, to change governments. Cool. That's all. That's good. Yeah, sorry, I was just trailing off at the end there. Yeah, that's super interesting. You're absolutely right. I should have thought to mention that sooner, but we can stick that in now. And
yes, I mean
it's definitely not me. Yeah.
I don't want to forget. So which one is you think in your mind like the strongest one?
Yeah, I would say so for sure. The strongest at the moment is GPT-4. I think that's unanimously true.
Yeah.
I saw Google released Palm 2 the other day, which is like what Bard is running off now. I haven't had a chance to test it extensively, but I know that like most stuff I've read says it's still not there. Like it's not anywhere near the level of OpenAI stuff.
No, I agree.
So I mean,
Bard is kind of just it doesn't hold a candle, pretty much, even to Bing.
And it's too boring. Like the responses are all very generic, and so
I know, right? It's kind of. I tried to engage with it a few times to play around, but it was just like, no.
Yeah, as soon as you start getting into the detail, it's like, nah, I'm not having that. So yeah, they're good. And then the open source stuff, I know, like, as much as they make a lot of noise about it, it's still like, if anything, at the level of GPT-3, it's nowhere near like 3.5, which is ChatGPT, and then 4. So catching up, but there's a long way to go yet. I think if you're going to use one, I use ChatGPT all day, pretty much to write stuff and summarize stuff, and we were thinking actually of doing the transcript of this through ChatGPT as well, and it will just come up with like all of the bullet pointed things that we talked about, like roughly what was said. So yeah, we'll just bung it through ChatGPT, and it's so glad I don't have to do that myself. It'll take ages. Is there anything else?
You started.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna joke. That's why you decided to start the podcast right now, right? So with all the tools that you have, it's easy. Just like that.
Yeah,
Transcript.
I'm.
This editing videos.
Yeah, there's so many things
Yeah, I
like
was just
that. I mean, this book is crazy. Like I'd have written the whole thing in Chat GPT if I had the chance again. But yeah, that's
you
got that
will.
ship
You
sailed
might.
now. Yeah, next one maybe.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Listen, and your book is gonna come out, right? This month, you said. I believe you said like it's gonna
Yeah,
be on Amazon.
it is. Yeah, it's on ebook already, and then it's coming out on Amazon. Like it takes ages
Yeah,
apparently to ship it around the world. So I'm really hoping like that the
I'm old
technologies
fashioned.
that I've written about are
I
still
like my
relevant.
books. You know,
Yeah, me
I
too.
don't really
I
like
can't wait to get
ebooks.
my hands on. Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah, I just hope that like there's not some major revolution between now and the print version coming out because you never know, it's something around the corner.
I know, right? It's been
Cool.
a
Is
running. Yeah, no, it's been a running joke like with me and a friend of mine. He's writing his PhD in the AI
yeah,
and the copyright, and he's just been like, "Can I just please finish my PhD? And just can you please stop coming up with all the new technology?" That's the subject, and he's been writing it for like a few years now. And boom, 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 starting November, every other week, something else coming out. It's just like I just
yeah.
can you please like I physically can't finish that. Something new keeps coming out. So yeah, let's hope. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. I feels like you have to write in
Nothing
real
else can do.
time. Just yeah,
And
yeah,
you'll
terrifying.
still be late. And you'll still be late,
Hmm.
even in real time.
I know, and I can see now the reviews of the book being like, this book only goes up until February 2023, and it hasn't got llama in, or and I was just like, come on, like the whole thing was done by the time that has been produced. So yeah. Um,
Who
anyway, all
cares
good fun.
about the reviews?